I'll level with you all, I've been putting this one off for a while. The final position in this series, having already looked at the greatest goalkeepers, left-backs, right-backs, centre-backs, holding midfielders, central midfielders, attacking midfielders, left-wingers, and right-wingers of the 21st century, today, at long last, it is the turn of the centre-forwards. I drew up my shortlist for this one weeks ago, and there were over 50 players on it. It was at that point that I thought, nah, do you know what? I'll do something else. And I've been putting it off ever since. This was by far the most difficult 7 of the series to compile. As you'll know by now if you have watched any of the other videos, the criteria in this series is solely the quality and quantity of a player's performances post-2000, which naturally punishes anyone who is over the age of about 45. Rarely has that been more pointed than in today's video though. I would contest that Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima, probably better known as the Brazilian Ronaldo, R9 or just Ronaldo, at his post-2000 peak between 2002 and 2005, is the greatest striker of the 21st century, even though Ronaldo's own peak came pre-2000 before his kneecap exploded. The fact that Ronaldo only played 282 games post-2000 though, 69 of them in Brazil, means there is simply no way that I could include him based upon the stated criteria. Nonetheless, I did just want to get it out there that he was a better player and a better centre-forward than anyone who is going to feature. The likes of Andrei Shevchenko, Christian Vieri, Dennis Bergkamp, Hernan Crespo, Patrick Kluivert, Filippo Inzaghi, Henrik Larsson, Alessandro Del Piero, and to an even greater extent, Gabriel Batistuta, Alan Shearer, and Romario are all punished for the same reason. Then you have the same problem at the opposite end of the scale with the likes of Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland, who I've no doubt would make a top 7 based upon the stated criteria in 10 years' time, but at 25 and 23, with only 360 and 276 games under their belts respectively, this series sadly just comes too soon for them. Just to give you some idea of the scale of the challenge, because it's very easy to forget about players when you're not forced to write them all down, some of the players who didn't even make my second narrowed down shortlist, which was basically a last 14, in addition to the 15 strikers that I have already mentioned, included the likes of Radamel Falcao, Miroslav Klose, Gonzalo Higuain, Robin van Persie, Edin Dzeko, Mario Gomez, Edinson Cavani, Diego Forlan, Robbie Keane, Klaas-Jan Huntelaar, Roy Mackay, Diego Milito, Fernando Torres, Romelu Lukaku, Michael Owen, Olivier Giroud, Alberto Gilardino, Antoine Griezmann, Luca Toni, Jermaine Defoe, Antonio Di Natale, Dimitar Berbatov, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Adriano, Carlos Tevez, Diego Costa, Mario Mandzukic, and Jamie Vardy. And breathe. They didn't even make my second shortlist. Hopefully you all now appreciate the mammoth task that I've taken on here then, which is probably tougher than that bloke who is running the length of Africa, after I just reeled off more legends of the game than Arsene Wenger's list of transfer targets that he missed out on at Arsenal. I will try to explain my logic as to why each striker features where, and the remaining honourable mentions will be credited later on, but without any further ado, who I am very sorry to say didn't even make my long list, here are the 7 greatest centre-forwards since 2000. 7th, Sergio Aguero. It would be fair to say that we get off to a strong start, though it must be said that Sergio Aguero only features by the narrowest of margins. Aguero's spot in this 7 might be a little safer had he not been forced to retire from football due to heart problems a little over 2 years ago, shortly after joining Barcelona, aged 33. But you have to remember that Aguero started out incredibly young, and his entire career has of course been post-2000. Aguero made his first team debut for Independiente in 2003, aged only 15, becoming the youngest player in the history of the Argentine Primera Division in the process. The record that he broke, incidentally, was Diego Maradona's, which had stood for almost 27 years until then. Aguero won the 2005 Under-20 World Cup with Argentina alongside Lionel Messi, and in 2007, he won it again, this time as Argentina's star man. At 17, he joined Atletico Madrid, And a couple of months later, having just turned 18, he made his senior debut for Argentina, who had strikers coming out of their ears at the time. Following a season settling in Atletico, Aguero came into his own in his second season, following Fernando Torres' departure, stepping out of the Spaniards' rather large shadow to score 27 goals in a single season while still aged only 18. In 2011, Aguero joined Manchester City, despite firm interest from both Real Madrid and Barcelona. He went on to become the Citizens' all-time record goal scorer and, arguably, the club's greatest player of all time, scoring 260 goals in 390 games, including that goal over 10 seasons, during which time he won 15 trophies. A born centre-forward, Aguero was diminutive, stocky and explosive, reminiscent in some ways, though I'm not saying he was as good, of Gerd Müller. He had a lovely range of finishes in his arsenal, and under Pep Guardiola, despite some initial reservations and doubts, he transformed beautifully into an all-round centre-forward who could link play and hardly ever stopped running. Little niggling short-term injuries plagued Aguero's playing days, preventing him from ever having a 50-plus game season post-Atletico, but when he did play 786 times for club and country, all post-2000 again, he was invariably brilliant, and that is just about enough to earn him a spot in 7th. 6th, Karim Benzema. Perennially underrated, at least until Cristiano Ronaldo left Real Madrid, and he took on the mantle of being the main man for arguably the biggest club in all of world football, there was simply no way, even though he is still playing, that Karim Benzema could miss out on this 7 based upon the stated criteria. As with Aguero, Benzema broke through very young, and was touted as a superstar from his early to mid-teens. Following 15 goals in 20 games for Lyon's second team in the third tier of French football, Benzema was fast-tracked straight into the first team at 16. He made his senior debut shortly after turning 17, but it was in the 2007-08 season that Benzema announced himself as one of the best centre-forwards in Europe, scoring 31 goals in 52 games as Lyon won the double and Benzema collected the Ligue 1 Player of the Year award. Benzema joined Real Madrid during the same summer as Kaká and Cristiano Ronaldo for consecutive world-breaking fees, and that meant, for the next 9 years at least, Benzema wouldn't be the star man. Throughout this time, a lot of people liked to propagate the idea that Benzema was being carried by Ronaldo. While it wouldn't be accurate to say that the reality was the opposite, Ronaldo was the best player at Real Madrid, there is no doubt of that, it certainly was the case that Ronaldo couldn't have dreamed of having a better or more unselfish strike partner throughout his best years, and it's little wonder that he cites Benzema as his best attacking partner, ahead of Wayne Rooney, who was also incredibly industrious and unselfish. It's worth noting that Benzema still put up outstanding numbers alongside Ronaldo. They were just dwarfed by Ronaldo's freakish output, but it was after Ronaldo left the Bernabeu that it perhaps dawned on people who hadn't been paying close attention what Benzema was really capable of. The 2021-22 season was Benzema's magnum opus, as he struck 44 times in 46 games, inspiring Real Madrid to a La Liga, Champions League and Spanish Super Cup winning treble, which deservedly saw him collect his first and only Ballon d'Or. The one blemish on Benzema's record, you could argue, as a player at least, excluding his routinely blemished personal life, is his lack of international achievements. Exiled from the national team because of those issues in his personal life for 6 years, Benzema's only notable international achievement came in the 2021-22 Nations League, though he did still score 37 goals from 97 caps for Les Bleus, despite his extended hiatus. All told, Benzema has scored 469 goals and made over 200 assists in 913 career appearances at club and international level to date, spending his entire career, until this season, competing at the very highest level and exhibiting remarkable consistency throughout that time. 6th is the minimum that he deserves. 5th, Wayne Rooney. Mentioned only a moment ago as Cristiano Ronaldo's second favourite strike partner, it's weird to sometimes watch history being rewritten in real time. For the best part of a decade, Wayne Rooney was unanimously considered to be England's best and most important player. When Rooney was injured, for example, going into the 2010 World Cup, you would do well to find a soul who wouldn't have said that he was the one England player that fans didn't want to miss that tournament, ahead of Lampard, Gerrard, or anyone else. Rooney broke through at Everton at the age of 16 like nothing you'd ever seen before. Though he was still only a boy, he was built like a man. When he scored his first Premier League goal against Arsenal 5 days before turning 17, he was already Everton's star man. Lightning quick, powerful, inventive, and oozing with confidence, Rooney was arguably the best player at Euro 2004, still aged only 18. I remember in England's opening game of that tournament against France, which I was at, he made the likes of William Gallas, Lilian Thuram and Claude Makelele, world-class players, look like second-rate ones, bouncing off them in challenges and winding his way between them for fun. I still think that, were it not for his injury against Portugal in the quarter-finals, in a game that England went on to lose on penalties, England could well have won that Euros. That same summer, Rooney joined Manchester United, and who could forget his hat-trick on his Champions League debut against Fenerbahce. That set the tone for what was to come, and though Rooney was incredibly prolific when played as a 9, his love of the game saw him perennially drop deep, preferring, personally, to play as a 10 or an either wing. That impacted Rooney's output, ultimately, compared to the rest of this 7, as did his early demise, likely due to burnout. But he still managed to become the all-time leading goalscorer for both Manchester United and England, arguably the biggest club in world football and the oldest national team on the planet. He has since been overtaken for England by Harry Kane. Rooney was at his best when he played on the edge, always seemingly on the verge of either scoring an absolute screamer or getting sent off, but there was much more to his game than just that. A brilliant all-round forward who could play anywhere in a front three and perhaps even in midfield at times. The great confusion with Rooney is that he became one of the greatest players of his generation, yet there is still just a nagging sense that he could have been even more. At 18, there's no doubt that he was a bigger talent than Cristiano Ronaldo and had achieved more at that age than Lionel Messi. Rooney never reached the heights of those two, nor did he enjoy anything like the longevity, for reasons that we need not get into. But at his best, he was the best player in the Premier League, among the best in the world, and I think that he is a solid shout for a spot at least in 5th. 4th, Thierry Henry. Alright, Arsenal fans, put your pitchforks down for a moment and allow me to explain. Thierry Henry is the best player and the best forward in this 7. Once again, if I were ranking this series on the ability of all players to have played in every position since 2000, or the best peaks in every position since 2000, he would be second in this 7, trailing only the Brazilian Ronaldo, who doesn't even feature. So Henry's spot in 4th isn't a comment on his ability or his peak, but more so simply on the fact that he is 46 years old. Henry therefore began his professional career in 1994, giving him 6 years of ineligible football, including his triumph with France at the 1998 World Cup. And though all of Henry's best football came post-2000, hence he still features in this incredibly competitive 7 all the way up in 4th, he joined the New York Red Bulls in 2010 and retired from football in 2014. That means we've only got 14 years to go on, and only 10 at the highest level, which is only a couple more than Kylian Mbappe, just to put it in some context. Those 10 years at the highest level were nothing short of extraordinary though. In my eyes, the greatest player of the Premier League era, no one has come close either before or since to replicating Henry's aura. Never has a Premier League player been more universally feared and respected by opponents, and it's easy to see why. An absolute nightmare to defend against, Henry had it all. Blistering pace, equally quick feet, flair in spades, endless invention, boundless creativity, a ferocious fighting spirit, and a remarkably sharp eye for goal. He was even half decent with his hands. The end result was a player who, in 8 seasons at Arsenal, became the Gunners' all-time leading goalscorer, making the PFA Team of the Year an incredible 6 times, and winning 4 Premier League Golden Boots. Given that Henry missed much of his last season at Arsenal through injury, that means that in 6 out of his 7 full seasons in the Premier League, he made the Team of the Year, and in over half of them, he won the division's Golden Boot, this in the era of Van Nistelrooy, Shearer, Owen and Drogba. After that, Henry spent 3 seasons at Barcelona, the latter 2 in Pep Guardiola's immortal team, in which, for the first time in a decade, he was no longer the main man. It's really only the quantity aspect of the criteria that limits Henry to a spot in 4th then, as the 2000s began when he was already 22 and he joined New York Red Bulls at 32. Nonetheless, he had to feature, and hopefully you'll understand when you see the top 3 why he couldn't quite crack the podium given those considerations. 3rd, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I think Thierry Henry was a better footballer who had a better peak than Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but in terms of the quality and quantity of a player's performances post-2000, Ibrahimovic was almost tailor-made for this series. The towering Swede broke into the Malmo first team in 1999, enjoying his breakout campaign in 2000. He retired some 23 years later, following 4 years back at AC Milan, having scored 573 goals in 988 games at club and international level. During the intervening period, Ibrahimovic won league titles in 4 different countries, was nominated for the Ballon d'Or on a whopping 11 occasions, won the Serie A Foreign Footballer of the Year award 5 times, the Serie A Footballer of the Year award 3 times, the Ligue 1 Player of the Year award also 3 times, and he became PSG's all-time leading goalscorer just 3.5 years after joining the club. He also joined Barcelona in 2009 for what was effectively a world record-breaking fee. He made the MLS Best 11 in both of his seasons in Los Angeles, and he scored 28 goals in 46 games for Manchester United, aged 35, despite having had many doubters who thought that he would be past his best. A magnificent athlete, Ibrahimovic is 6'5" tall, but brilliant with the ball at his feet. He was strong, agile, acrobatic, creative, and capable of scoring every variation of finish imaginable. He was also deceptively quick. Not the quickest off the mark, but when Ibrahimovic got up to full speed, few defenders could keep up with him. Combine it all and you have something resembling the perfect centre-forward, which is why Ibrahimovic is the 4th highest goalscorer of the 21st century, and the 2nd highest in this 7, trailing only the man up next. 2nd, Robert Lewandowski. I imagine that most people would shuffle the top 3 in this 7 based upon personal preference, though I don't think there can be any doubt about them being the 3 based upon the criteria, and I came very close to putting Robert Lewandowski top. The only player in this 7 who is still playing at the very highest level, age 35, Lewandowski is the highest scoring centre-forward of the 21st century and the 3rd highest goalscorer overall, behind the inevitable Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. That is a pretty impressive achievement, especially given that Lewandowski isn't done yet, along with the fact that he didn't really get going until a little bit later than the likes of Ibrahimovic, Rooney, and Aguero. Don't get me wrong, Lewandowski was by no means a late bloomer. He made his senior international debut with Poland within a month of turning 20, but his breakout campaign at the highest level, namely his 2nd season at Borussia Dortmund, didn't come until he was 23 years old. That's not late by any means, but it gave him a little bit of catching up to do against such elite level competition who were competing or indeed winning golden boots in their teams. Lewandowski swallowed that ground up with ease though. In the 11 seasons since that breakout campaign, Lewandowski has averaged over 40 goals a season. Averaged. If a striker scores 40 goals in a season once in their career, that is a phenomenal achievement. To average more than that over an entire decade, every season, is absurd. Lewandowski's most prolific campaign came in the 2019-20 season, in which he scored 55 goals in only 47 games, as Bayern Munich won a European treble. And only the strange decision not to award a Ballon d'Or that year due to COVID denied him of a near certain first and only crown. Lewandowski deserved that title in some ways, just as Benzema deserved his crowning moment in 2022, having performed consistently at such a high level for so long, but having routinely been denied such accolades due to the relentless brilliance of Messi and Ronaldo. Lewandowski made the Bundesliga Team of the Season 9 times and was the division's highest scorer on 7 occasions. In his first season at Barcelona, after leaving Bayern Munich, Lewandowski was, unsurprisingly, the top scorer in La Liga as well, winning the Pichichi Trophy. Perhaps not as silky or as gifted as some of the other forwards in this 7, Lewandowski is an incredibly efficient and fine-tuned number 9. He's a good athlete, his movement and anticipation are second to none, his first touch is sharp, he's excellent in the air, and his finishing is out of this world. A career total of 669 goals in 969 games and still counting is a reflection of that fact, plus over 150 assists. Lewandowski is the second highest scorer in the history of the Bundesliga, behind the late great Gerd Müller. He ranks third behind only Messi and Ronaldo in the all-time Champions League scoring charts, and he is the fourth highest European goal scorer in the history of men's international football, soon to be third, despite playing for a far from an elite-level powerhouse on the international stage in the form of Poland. And of course, all of this came post-2000. A podium position was guaranteed, and he takes second place for me. 0. Honourable mentions. Obviously, I mentioned most of the honourable mentions in that long, tedious, and rambling introduction, if you can remember that far back now. If you can, then you'll also remember that I only named players who didn't make my second shortlist of 14, from which I selected my final 7. Those 7 remaining honourable mentions, therefore, who came closest to featuring, in no particular order, were Didier Drogba, Samuel Eto'o, David Villa, Raul Gonzalez, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Harry Kane, and Francesco Totti. Totti, Raul, and Van Nistelrooy, it should be said, all played a fair bit of football prior to 2000, which obviously counted against them. Meanwhile, Kane is the youngest of my final 14, still aged only 30, yet he was perhaps the closest to featuring. Kane is already England's all-time leading goalscorer, with 62 goals from 89 caps. He has already outscored the likes of Rooney, Falcao, Drogba, Tevez and Van Persie in terms of career goals, and in his debut campaign in the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich, Kane is already scoring goals at the same rate as Robert Lewandowski at his very best, despite being in a much less dominant team. What's more, as impressive as the stats are, Kane is so much more than merely a great goalscorer. His hold-up play, passing, crossing, and creativity are of the calibre of a world-class number 10, so he can consider himself somewhat unfortunate to miss out. I've no doubt not only that Kane would make this 7 in probably only 12 months' time, but that by the time he retires, he will either be in or will be threatening the podium places, usurping Aguero, Benzema, Rooney, and, on the basis of having played all of his games post-2000, probably Henry as well. As for the likes of Drogba, Eto'o and Villa, what can you say? Leaving them out was brutal, and all would be worthy candidates for 5th, 6th or 7th, but based upon the stated criteria, I just couldn't quite justify putting them ahead of Rooney, Benzema or Aguero, and let's face it, whatever happened, I was always going to upset someone. Now for the small matter of top spots. First, Luis Suarez. There will be people out there who think that either Zlatan Ibrahimovic and or Robert Lewandowski were better centre-forwards than Luis Suarez, and I can understand all of those points of view. I don't think that there is a great deal in it, to be perfectly honest, but I will do my best to justify why I've put Suarez in top spot. As with those two, obviously, Suarez fits the criteria perfectly. A seasoned veteran now, age 37, whose entire career has come post-2000, and he has played an awful lot of football, suffering very few long-term injuries, during that time. In fact, most of Suarez's lengthiest spells on the sidelines have actually been the result of suspensions after he has bitten or racially abused someone.
Okay, but that's worse. I mean, you do get how that's worse, right?
Yes, I am aware that's worse. I was just providing some context. Suarez has so far scored a grand total of 557 goals in 938 games at club and international level, which puts him 4th in this millennium's scoring charts, trailing Ronaldo, Messi, Lewandowski, and very narrowly Ibrahimovic. In all probability, Suarez will overtake Ibrahimovic at Inter Miami, having recently joined the MLS side. One could argue that Lewandowski and Ibrahimovic have never had a season quite like Suarez's last at Liverpool, in which he scored 31 goals in 33 Premier League games, none of which came from the penalty spot, and almost dragged the Reds to a maiden Premier League era title. Had Suarez not been suspended at the start of that season, they almost certainly would have won it. You could also make the case that Suarez's peak, namely the 2015-16 season, was the most impressive of any of the three podium play strikers. Suarez scored 59 goals in 53 games that season, somehow managing to become the star man, in terms of goal scoring at least, in a front line containing Lionel Messi and Neymar, and finally, after about 8 years, managing to dethrone Messi and Ronaldo as the highest scorer in Europe in a season. Suarez proved himself to be capable of both dragging a somewhat mediocre team to greatness and of starring alongside fellow superstars on the biggest of stages, performing consistently with remarkable longevity. Somewhat unorthodox technically, Suarez has a magnificent first touch, but his dribbling has routinely involved running into or in between players, or just into otherwise congested spaces, almost playing the ball off defenders at times, invariably getting the bounce of the ball and coming out with it on the other end. To watch it once or twice, you might think that it was a fluke. To watch it 4 or 5 times a game, over almost 1,000 matches, spanning 2 whole decades, it's clear that it is anything but. Statistically, there is very little to split the top 3. On the so-called eye test, I'd also argue that there isn't a great deal between them. It's more a matter of personal preference. When a decision is as close as that, I like to imagine that I'm picking a team, which is how we will conclude this series, and I can only pick one of the available options in that position. Across the millennium as a whole, and certainly at his peak, Suarez edges that for me, which is why he takes top spot. Honestly, that was a brutal 7 to compile, particularly whittling it down to 14 and then 7 just to begin with, and then ordering the 7 themselves. I really wouldn't argue with anyone who would have Drogba, Eto'o, or Villa in their 7s, or would order Ibrahimovic, Lewandowski and Suarez in any 1-2-3 combination, which just goes to show what a difficult 7 this was. Surprisingly, by far the trickiest in this series. I mean, Dave Kitson didn't even make the long list. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. I hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And of course, goes without saying, make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on both for this channel, HITC Sevens, and also for my second channel, Alfie Potts Harmer, both of which, I should say, should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might fancy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all 3, should you wish to do so. And all of those links, plus a whole lot more, should be down in the video description below. Cheers.